Welcome back to Real Repairs for Real Customers. Many in our industry have got started off on the wrong foot because they had instructors that were ill-informed, perhaps, or that did not appreciate quality workmanship. And so they have not gotten exposed to the water-based pigment color matching system. I was aware back in 1992 that I needed to make this transition in my automotive business from solvents to water-based. In fact, nearly the whole industry, the whole manufacturing industry, had changed by that point. So this was obviously the wave of the future. And so from that time on, our seminars mostly concentrated on the water-based pigment system. Once getting started in it, we realized that it's easy and it's user-friendly. But how can you know? Because if you don't know about it, it's intimidating, right? It's not until we jump in that we can see that it is indeed easy and user-friendly. So that's what we intend to do in this video. We have something to color match, and I know that my viewers on the channel always like it when we feature something to do with color matching. But along the way, let's concentrate on what are the pigment system protocols. What should we expect to put into practice as we employ this water-based pigment system? Because we want to expose it in every aspect of it so that we feel comfortable in using it, right? We want to examine every feature of it. And so that's what we intend to do with this video. And you will maybe not appreciate the water-based system until you get started in it, and then you'll thank me later. But first we have to jump in. So let's do that. Let's dive right on into it. We have two dash pieces to recolor. The dash is covered with this vinyl, and so we need these two pieces to match. I have already scrubbed these pieces with a scuff pad and a degreaser. I've cleaned them further with the alcohol prep, and I have used acetone to clean them. As you can see on here, it's crazed the plastic a little bit, but it is clean, and we're ready for a good adhesion. I have a gun specifically of a different color that I use specifically for solvents only, and therefore I use it for my adhesion promoter in this case, but also for solvent clears. No color at all goes through this gun, and it's only for solvents. I'm using it here for my adhesion promoter. As you will find out, if you ever try to use the same gun for water-based as for solvents, you will get nothing but chewing gum inside the gun, and that will clog up everything, and that is a bear to clean out. This gun I store in my cloth repair box because that is where I use adhesion promoter and clear solvent the most, but I will pull it out when I need the adhesion promoter for plastics, as in this case. And now we're ready for a second overall coat of adhesion promoter. So our target color we might define as an orange color. What do we know about orange? Orange is a secondary color. where red and yellow meet in the middle. So our orange is going to be either reddish or yellowish. Those are the only two choices. For the yellow component, we can choose 160 yellow oxide because it has the closest value to our swatch. And we can combine that with 131 true red. The yellow is slightly lighter in value than our swatch, and our red is slightly darker than our swatch. So we should balance the value at the same time we're balancing the color. We can see in this instance that 180 orange would be wrong because it's way too light in value. And in a similar comparison, our 150 light yellow is way too light in value to be of any good in our color matching here. So our choice of pigments is both by color and by value. Good housekeeping is absolutely essential to making a success of mixing with pigments. Always mix in your mixing station. Working out of my box, my mixing station is always here with the pigments, the base, all the additives, my paper cups, and my strainers. That way I always have a mixing cup and I always have a new strainer. I have a trash can handy right here by my mixing station, and right above it is my gun holder. I strongly suggest using a paper towel to open and close your pigments, because pigments will get absolutely on everything. It will track like mud on every surface, on your hands, on your steering wheel, on your car, on the seats, everywhere. Using a paper towel keeps the pigment off your gloves and off all these other surfaces that you'll be tracking it to. Good housekeeping is absolutely essential. We don't know exactly how much red to add to our yellow. At this point, it's an educated guess. A wooden stir stick is really handy for mixing up your pigments. Notice I tilt the cup a little bit. That way, the stir stick contacts the side of the cup all the way down. All pigments that fall down to the side of the cup are then brought back up into the solution. Take notice of the next concrete truck you see. Okay, so our first go is not far off. It looks a little light on the stick, and because we have just pigment, what you see is what you get. Can we darken it with some brown? Well, we have a couple of choices of brown. Which one shall we use? This is the 140 brown. It's very dark. Can we use it? Possibly, but let's take a look at the other brown. This is the 145 brown. It is closer to the target value. It's got some red in it. So I think we can use this to darken the value just fine. Will the red component of this brown be too much red for our mix? Well, let's mix it in and find out. So here we're dealing with strictly raw pigments. There's no binder to this. We will add the binder in just a little bit. You will find when you do add the binder that it gives you a more thorough mixing of the pigments as well. I think our color is good. Close enough at least that at this point we can add our binder or our base. Consider the binder or the base as the glue that holds the pigment particles together and holds them to the plastic. The ratio is about 20% pigment to 80% base, or 1:4. Now, since we're coating plastic pieces, we're going to use our plastic primer as our binder. The plastic primer, as we've mentioned before, by default is very shiny, and our vinyl is more of a matte finish compared to that. So we will automatically reach for some flattener, and that is just one of the many additives that allows us to dial in the exact finish we need, which makes this system so versatile. How much flattener? Well, we don't really know. Let's add some, and our first spray coat will show us how well we did. It will also show up our color a little better. Speaking of which, the binder will also tend to whiten up the look of our pigments while it's wet. But then once we dry it down on the surface that we've sprayed it, the binder will turn more clear and the true color of the pigments will be manifest. All of our mess goes on the paper towel. Did I mention good housekeeping? When we're done with this job, that paper towel will go right in the trash can. It can be helpful to wipe some of the color on some vinyl or on the plastic or seat, whatever you're working on, first as a good test. That can give you a better view of how the color is going to finally spray. Drying between coats here and dabbing it will leave more color behind and give a better view of how the finished product will look. And that's going to be good enough for our primer coat. But before we put this in the gun, let's add a little bit of cross-linker. Now, the plastic primer is already very strong, almost like an armor coating, but the cross-linker will further cement that idea. 2 ingredients for a durable finish are the cross-linker and baking it. And in our case, we use the hairdryer. So next we need to strain it into the gun. I am depleting all of the residue out of the gun. As you know, I leave some ammonia cleaner in there to make sure that we clear out all of the residue. You can also take a wire brush, clean the nozzle just a little bit, make sure everything is spraying correctly. And now we're ready to strain directly into the cup. It's really handy here that you have a holder to keep the gun steady. And of course, the trash can is right underneath, so when we're done, everything goes right into the trash can. Did I mention good housekeeping, by the way? It's a good idea to make sure your spray pattern is what you're looking for and the volume is what you're looking for here, and that your gun is spraying nicely. Now, you might pull a full trigger on the gun on your final step where you want a good, solid, heavy coat. On the first coat, though, you want something much lighter. This is simply an adhesion coat. We're not trying to hide the original color of the piece just yet. And so typically here we will just pull a hair trigger. We won't pull it all the way. And so we don't use the gun like everyone else will probably use a gun. Just pull a little bit on the trigger, get a light coat, and determine your coverage by the speed of your passes. Going too heavy on your first coat may result in some fisheyes or some runs. We first of all just need to get that good adhesion coat down. I'm going to use a hair dryer to speed up this drying of the first coat so I can move right on to the second coat. This is coat number 2, and I want to be especially concerned here about getting into all these recessed areas. So I have to spray from north, south, east, and west. We've got a lot of nooks and crannies on this piece. Now that we have two coats on, it's easy to see that our paint is a little bit too dark and a little bit too red. Thanks to our 145 brown. It did its trick, but it went slightly over. So can we add some of our yellow back in? Our yellow will take us to the yellow side that we want to be to balance out the red, and it will also contribute some lightness to the value, which is exactly what we want. So adding more of our yellow oxide here is the answer. And here is another secret. When you see the need to make an adjustment, do not fret about having to dump the paint out of your gun, make an adjustment, strain it back into your gun again. It only takes a minute. It's so worth it. And we can wipe our stir stick on the paper towel. Did I mention? Never mind. Okay, so here's a good word of advice. When you have adjusted the color, spray a light overall coat of that adjusted color. The end result then will be a combination of both of those coats. Is that far enough? If it's not far enough, we can always put a second additional adjusted color coat on. But what if we've adjusted it too light? Then just an initial light coat over the existing color might be all we need. And here I'm just taking extra pains to make sure we got into every recess and along every edge. And I even have a little bit left over, which is good because we have to also paint the defroster vents in the dash. We'll do that when we deliver the parts. End of job, ready for delivery. But don't go yet. We have a special treat for you coming up right now. We've had some viewers express concern about switching from a solvent system to a water-based system, especially in view of the fact that they live in a colder climate and they're concerned about the freezing temperatures and so forth. So I thought what we'd do today is bring in somebody from the cold north, and that is our friend Gary Babinick. Gary, welcome in.
Thanks, Rick. I always enjoy sharing your channel with you. You take a big risk when we do this. You know that, don't you?
Gary, it's been a long time, so you're due to come back in and say a few words of wisdom. Gary, what we are addressing today, we're reviewing using the Pigment system for those folks that have not ventured there yet. And we want to allay some of their concerns about switching over. And also, I would like you to offer something that would be of the most help to our viewers concerning the colder temperatures and how you deal with that. Can you help us out with that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be glad to, Rick. I started in this business over 30 years ago, and when I got into the business, I had solvent-based dyes. That's what I was comfortable with. That's what I knew. I knew water-based was out there, but like most of us were reluctant to switch. So I plodded along with my solvent dye, and I didn't want to switch. I knew it. I could mix it. The colors came out right. One day I found out there are disadvantages to using solvent, and that comes to hot temperatures. I had a repair one day on a Jaguar that it was about 90 degrees out in Michigan, and I could not get that solvent-based dye to lay down properly. It felt like sandpaper when I was done. And I knew there was nothing I could do about it because I didn't have any retarder for my to slow that drying down. So I thought I'll come back next week and I'm just going to redo this when it's not as hot. I came in the next week and a competitor had come in and redid my seat, and I was hot. I don't like that. It bothered me to no end. And by the end of that day, and I knew he used waterbase. By the end of that day, I had a waterbase system ordered, and I learned to use it. I started with the premixed colors. I didn't even do pigments. I started with the premix, which it's a little easier. It's harder to get the colors right because of the way it dries, but I was real happy with the results. It was sometime later, and I'm sure you're the one that prodded me. We were probably at a convention somewhere, and you said you need to get the pigment dyes, and I, not quite as reluctantly this time, went to pigment dyes, and I learned how to use it, and I'll never go back. My brother-in-law worked with me for a few weeks when he moved up this way to get established, and he only used solvent dyes. Well, he was riding in my van. I didn't have solvent dyes. He was forced to learn how to use pigment dyes. And I think it was probably within a week, Doug says, I'll never go back. I will never go back to solvent dyes. And that's how I got there. As far as the cold weather, the only time I have problems with it, using it in the field, is if it gets too cold, my paint gun will act like a snow machine. If you spray water in the air, it's going to come down as snow. If you spray water-based dye through a paint gun when it's 28 degrees outside, it will literally freeze right in the end of your gun. I have two ways to deal with that. The first way is I'll get my heat gun out and just heat the cup, heat the tip, finish the job. And the second way I deal with it is I go, it's too cold for my dye. It's too cold for me. I'm going home. And I'll go fishing. I'll do something different. But there are ways to do it if you have to work. One of the things that you want to make sure you do is in cold weather. So I learned this painting cars. You can paint a car when it's 32 degrees outside as long as what you're painting is warm. It's just going to take longer for your paint to dry. But if your product that you're trying to paint isn't warm enough, it's really hard to get adhesion on it. You'll get runs, you'll get a mess. I don't think it's quite as critical with water-based dye, but it is nice. Normally, by the time I get to the dye process on a repair, the seat's pretty warm anyway because I've used a heat gun on it for quite a while, making them a repair. So when I get to the dye part, the seat's usually pretty warm. If it's not, start the car up. Yeah. If it's got seat heaters, turn the seat heaters on. Just get a heat gun, a simple heat gun, and just warming that seat up a little bit before you dye it helps a lot. I always rub my first coat of dye in. I think that's just a good practice. It's something I learned when I learned how to dye. Rub that first coat in, and then I don't have dye failures because of the temperature. I may get a dye failure that won't come out of my gun because it's too cold, but other than that, I just don't have a problem with it. And,
so you would recommend warming the car up, turning the heater on, so you get the seats warmed up, because you're not going to get adhesion when it's cold anyway. I don't care what product you're using.
Right. Yeah. Either that or just heating it with a heat gun is probably faster. A lot of times I don't have the keys to a car. I work a little bit differently where I pull up to the car and I can, as long as it's open, I can make the repair. So I most of the times will heat it up with a heat gun.
How about your personal vehicle now? The heat is not on in your vehicle all day long, is it? Or does it have to be?
Most of the time my vehicle's running because of how I use an inverter. And if I have a big leather job where I'm running my air compressor and my heat gun are going at the same time for a long time, I have to let the car run anyway to keep the batteries charged up. And if the car's running, the heat's on. The other thing you have to consider is I was very fortunate. My first house had a garage, but it wasn't heated. So I had a little ceramic heater. If I knew it was going to get down into the mid-20s at night, I would go out and I'd put a ceramic heater in my vehicle and let it run all night. My second house, fortunately, had a heated garage. I know people that don't have a garage and their vehicle sits outside, and you can't You can't let your vehicle sit outside if you're using all water-based products. Not only does your dye freeze, but you have a lot of glues, and they'll freeze. So a little ceramic disc heater in your vehicle at night when it's going to get too cold will save you a lot of money and a lot of product. Um, but you just keep an eye on the temperature. Now my vehicle is pulled into my shop. It's 60 degrees in there, so I don't have to worry about it anymore at night. But those are the considerations you have to make when it's cold out.
So, in a worst case scenario, Gary, would you think keeping your water-based products in one container that you can bring inside at night and just take it back with you in the morning?
Absolutely, that's one way to do it. You could do that, and if you don't want to run a heater, but I look in my van and I have so much water-based stuff in there. It would be hard, but to just take your dyes and your glues in would be one way to do it. Absolutely, for sure.
Yes. So there are house painters that use latex paints,
Sure.
no matter what the climate, and they have to deal with that. You can't let that freeze either, or it'll be no good.
Right.
So
Right.
they have to deal with the same things that we're talking about here.
Yep, absolutely. But I do have that one hard and fast rule. If it's too cold for me to paint, if my stuff's going to freeze at the end of my paint gun, and my water-based cleaners are gonna freeze, I'm going home. I'm fortunate to be able to just say, okay, I'm done for the day. It's too cold. I usually got a fishing shanty in my other vehicle. We just head out and go fishing. So
So
I don't do
how
those
many
days
days
when it's
out?
really cold.
I'm sorry. How many days out of the year would you say that would be for you in your northern climate there?
Well, today is actually the first day we've had anything that even resembles winter, and this is normally a work day for me. I'm partially retired, but Friday is a work day. But we've got a blizzard that's starting to rage outside, and I won't go. But Rick, it's really not that much. There's guys that have got a lot worse than me. The guys I know up in North Dakota, uh, that's brutal cold. I mean, but those guys have shops they work in. I work outdoors. Maybe a handful of days through the winter, it will get that cold to where you can't work, and it usually comes in stretches.
Do your
It's
dealerships,
supposed to be in the single digits.
yeah, so if it is in the single digits, do your dealerships allow you a space to pull in sometimes?
If they have a car that has to be done, I will do that. If they don't have anything that has to be done, I don't like working indoors. I've worked outdoors in Michigan for 32 years, and you have to literally drive me indoors. The light is horrible. I have to have my van close at hand, and I hate going in and out of a door and dragging hoses under garage doors and doing that. My vehicle is set up to work right out of it, that if I can't get my van next to the vehicle, it's a real hassle. I do it if I have to do it for a customer car or something that needs to be delivered right away. But to say I need a place to work indoors today because it's cold, I won't do that. I'm going to tolerate it outdoors. I'm very tolerant of the cold. I grew up in Michigan. I ice fish. I skied. I hunt. I'm outdoors almost all the time anyway. So the cold doesn't bother me that much. It's when it bothers my dye and my cleaners that start freezing. That if I have a job that has to be done, I have to go indoors at that point.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought about, because as you know, back several decades ago, I was also distributing products. If folks would order a product and we shipped it out the same day, it could very well be that there's a winter storm, and during shipping, the product freezes. You know, the shipping could go, say, through Chicago and onto the destination. So it would behoove the technician to order products in advance so he doesn't have to have products shipped in the middle of the winter, wouldn't you say?
That's a really good point. I had a shipment delivered to me, a large shipment of dyes and clears, and it was in the middle of the winter time. And I had a UPS driver. I've got a fairly long driveway, and he didn't like coming down here in the wintertime. I came in that night and I saw it hanging on the gate down by the road, and I fortunately I saw it, and it hadn't been there long enough to freeze. But if I would have missed that, that product would have frozen overnight, and it would have cost me or UPS a lot of money for replacing all the stuff that would have froze. But that's a really good idea. I usually have enough stuff around that I won't need to order for a month or two, and I can wait and look at the weather. I also have deliveries here at my house that don't leave them outside. They don't. If I'm gone and the house is locked up and Brenda's not home, they just leave them on my doorstep. So you just want to make sure when you're ordering water-based stuff that you get it inside as quickly as possible. Or, like you said, really good, just order enough of it in the fall that you don't have to worry about it through the winter.
Yeah, it's better to plan.
And pigment dyes go so far. It's so much more economic in the long run. You guys out there, I can guarantee you're going to save a lot of money by going pigments. It's cheaper. You're mixing your own. You have total control over the color. Solvent dyes. Anybody that's buying gas or petroleum products know their solvent-based dye products are going sky high. And if you're using an aerosols, those are really expensive. You want to save some money. Look into at least going to a premix water base. And if you really want to save money and get total control over your work and your color, go pigment. Once you go pigment, you'll never go back.
So that was my next question for you, is the economics of it, which you've already answered. And to think about premixes, you have a variety of colors to choose from in premixes. Some colors that are not as popular may sit on the shelf for a very long time. Isn't that true?
That's true.
And
when I say premix, Rick, I was using premixed colors to make my own colors.
Sure. But if you have an unusual, say something you don't use as frequently, that premixed color will sit on the shelf for a long time, and the pigments will settle to the bottom and get hard.
Yep.
And it'll be hard to rejuvenate that.
Yep.
So
exactly.
The other economic advantage is that your pigments stay good like almost forever.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, so the pigments that you have represent an infinite number of colors for the future. It's just so there's no product that's sitting and going to waste because of the shelf life of the premix.
That's right. And when you're dealing with automotive colors, you don't need very many premix colors. You really don't. If the time I get into a lot of different premix colors is doing furniture. I use a lot more magentas and purples and red colors in that than I do automotive. Because of the way I learned to mix colors, I came out of training with absolutely zero color matching at all. I learned to do it right by the seat of my pants. Quick story, first color I ever mixed was Dove Gray. After I had all my rolled out dyes in little bottles on the ground, I found out the gray was more than white and black. I had it all in little tiny bottles, and not one of them matched what I was trying to do. And I learned on my own that there's yellows and browns and gray and other colors, reds that go into color to even to make a light gray. It's not just black and white. And when you have your pigment dye system, you got total control over that. And you can make, I learned that I could make any color but blue or red in automotive, which you don't see either one of those colors very much anyway. I could make any gray or brown to black with 4 basic colors: red, white, black, and yellow. I told Rick this at one time, and I had no color theory, and he looked at me like, "What, are you crazy?" But when I told him, he stopped, and I'll never forget this. He stopped, thought about it, he goes, that'll probably work. I remember you saying that would probably work. And it did work for me for years. But when I learned how to make pigment colors and introducing browns, and brown has become a huge color for me to use, it just made things a lot simpler to match, get to that perfect match on a color when you learn what the other colors are that are out there to use. But I literally learned how to make grays and browns and anything in an automotive color with 4 basic colors. I used to teach it to guys, the 4 color method. It's not proper, it's not right, It's not theory, but I made it work because I didn't have any training. I didn't meet you until I was probably, what, 10 years in the business. So we've only known each other for over about 20 years. So, Rick, I want to thank you because I learned of the color theory and a lot of that from you. And I try to pass it on.
Yes. I do appreciate you helping our viewers to feel more comfortable about switching over, Gary, because our goal, on this channel, and you've helped me along that, is to help educate, but also to make it more comfortable for people in the business to strive to attain more instruction and higher skills. But we want them also to feel comfortable about it. They have to feel like this is something easy to do, and everybody has their preferences, and it's kind of difficult to switch because you feel uncomfortable in the switching. New things don't come very readily. So thank you for helping our viewers to feel more comfortable about that change.
You're welcome, Rick. And once you've done it and once you work it, it doesn't take long. Color theory is color theory. Once you understand that, the colors you're putting in, you're going to have the same colors with pigment dyes as you're going to have with solvent dyes. They dry a little differently, and that's probably what you have to learn. But the results are so much better. And there's furniture colors that I don't think you could even match with solvent-based dyes, and it wouldn't feel right, it wouldn't look right. And one thing I like to do, Rick, and we've talked about this a lot, is what other people do in the field reflects on us. Their product, what they're leaving behind, really does reflect on us. Now, our customers know that maybe that's not our work, but ultimately, I want to see everybody be able to do the repairs that you and I make, because that's a reflection on our industry. And that shows me that we have craftsmen out there. And I know you strive on that all the time. I do too. That's our saying, go be craftsmen. And if you're spraying solvent base out of a rattle can, I don't think that's being the craftsman that you can be. And if you want to become that person, if it's important to you like it is to Rick and I, you're going to want to do the pigment dyes for sure.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Gary. And we're going to let you sign off of our discussion here and leave the folks with a good word.
All right, Rick. Thank you. I really appreciate it. You guys go out there and be craftsmen. Learn how to use this stuff and just do it. Just do it. That sounds like a Nike commercial. Just go do it. So thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. I'm going to go play in the snow.